So I put together a list of 5 things. 5 that I want to see the Carolina Panthers, Dan Morgan, Dave Canales, Brad Idzik if he's in the Brain Trust. I want to see Brant Tillis once he becomes part of the Brain Trust, who's the new numbers guy, that they can do this offseason. And we'll go 5 to 1, right? 1 being what I think is priority number 1, and we'll build up. 5, additional pass catchers that you can trust. DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, Emir Smith-Marset are all free agents. That means you have to fill in the depth of your wide receiver room, right? We're not necessarily talking about number ones, not yet at least. We're not talking about a guy that needs 100 catches. We need guys who can be a 3rd or 4th option and you can trust, right? The best offenses in the NFL either have Patrick Mahomes or a whole bunch of guys that you can trust as playmakers, right? You look at the Lions, they trusted Josh Reynolds. Maybe they shouldn't have. But Sam Laporta, stud. Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield, stud. Amon-Ra St. Brown, stud. Depending on who you are, you might trust Jamison Williams. You look at and that goes on for all of them. I mean, look at the Niners. They might be the best example. So they need depth at the pass catching position, depth at wide receiver. And that's like, it seems like the easiest because there are so many wide receivers coming out of college every year. There are so many wide receivers because every team needs 5, 6, 7 of them, right? Every team needs a bunch. So there's a lot of guys getting experience every year. It's the challenge of Dan Morgan. It's the challenge of Dave Canales to find the right ones. Right, sometimes it's kind of nice if like you need a running back and there's one running back. All right, I'm gonna go get that one, right? But when you're like, hey, I need a wide receiver, and they're like, good, evaluate these 150 wide receivers.
Have fun.
And you got to pick 3, and they have to be cheap. Needle in a haystack, but that's what they have to do. That's number 5. Number 4, additional edge rushers, and I'm adding to this, Frankie Louvu re-signed.
Okay.
Regardless of what happens with Brian Burns. If Brian Burns is there, he needs someone to take away the attention from tackles, tight ends, and running backs. He can't get the stud treatment every single play. Or if he is, somebody needs to be taking advantage of it on the other side.
Yes.
So they need, and if he's not there, by the way, which is a big debate, if Brian Burns is tagged and traded, if he's holding out, if there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with Brian Burns, then you need a whole new basically edge rushing unit unless you really, really trust a huge turnaround from somebody like Gross Matos or DJ Johnson or Amari Barno making a huge glow up. And that's where Frankie Louvu comes in. Frankie Louvu has 12.5 sacks over the last 2 years. He's not a full-time edge rusher.
Oh, no.
So
he plays off the ball a lot.
So what I like to see is you bring in those additional edge rushers, and then once you can kind of start dictating to the offense, right? You're either going to double team Brian Burns or we're going to take advantage of you on the other side where they're not getting as much resources. Then you deploy Frankie Louvu all over the gosh darn place because he is versatile. Right now, it's easier for offenses to hone in on Brian Burns and Louvu because there's not a lot else that they're afraid of. Derrick Brown is very, very good, but it's just hard to become a pass rusher from the inside when you have so much responsibility in the run game. That's number 4. Number 3. Ready for this? Plays right into number 4.
Hit me.
Figure out Brian Burns and Derrick Brown's future.
That's pretty straightforward.
Are you trading them to help replenish your assets, which would be a flex by Dan Morgan, right? Anytime you're a GM and you trade a sure thing, a solid proven player for picks and prospects, you're saying, I'm so good at talent evaluation, I'm so good at asset management that I can turn this pile of magic beans into something worth more than Brian Burns and Derrick Brown. Or, right? If you're getting rid of both, you're getting rid of one. Or are you, the opposite is kind of a flex too. Are you sold on them at huge contract numbers? Brian Burns isn't going to be like, oh, new coach, cool. Now I'll sign for, below market rate edge rusher. Derrick Brown's not going to say, I just broke the record for most tackles by an interior defensive lineman in NFL history, so let's talk hometown discount. Like, there's none of that going on. So it is a bold decision in either direction. Are you convicted enough in them that you're going to pay them huge amounts of money? Or are you convicted enough in yourself that you can take the magic beans, the picks and prospects and players kind of assortment and turn that into more value than guys that we already know are pretty good? That's number 3. And we're going to talk about that more later on. Number 2. Now we get to, like, these are the musts. Mm-hmm. These are mandatory.
Gotta have it.
They're probably all mandatory, for being honest.
Let's be real.
But these are tier 1 extra super duper double secret probation mandatory. You need 2 stud offensive linemen. 2.
Yeah.
And where they play is based on your plan with Ickey Ekwonu, which you have to come up with. Are you keeping him at left tackle? Then you probably need a stud center and guard. Then you throw Christensen on one side, Moten if he's still around on the other, and Ickey at left tackle. Yeah, are you moving him to guard? Then I would say you probably need a stud guard and a stud tackle. And when I say stud, obviously, Trent Williams isn't growing on trees, right? You're not going to go.
No.
You're not going to go grab, one of the best in the league, but there are usually some kind of serviceable starting. You know what you're going to get. Your quarterback's going to trust them. Tackles out there in the free agent and or trade market every year. Think Orlando Franklin. Think Jawan Taylor. Think like Donovan Smith. And I know they all jump to good teams, but maybe you pay him a little more to jump to Carolina. And number 1, a number 1 wide receiver. By the way, number 2 and number 1 are pure. Please do this for Bryce Young. Get him an offensive line that he can trust, and get him a number 1 wide receiver that he can trust.
Yeah.
That he, like, if the offensive line does have a breakdown, where is he looking right now? Then who can win quickly? Who can be open when they're not open, right? Open when there's a guy covering them. And this is probably going to have to be a free agent signing, or if you get really lucky, that number 33 overall pick. I know it's a deep wide receiver class, but I think you might want someone a little bit more proven. So if it's probably going to be a free agency signing, the options are out there. T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman Jr., Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown. This is the free agency class. Mm-hmm. Some of those guys might get tagged. It might be lower. And I know Greg Olson today, who is everybody's cat's meow right now because he did a really good job in the broadcast booth over the weekend. His kind of advice to the Panthers was you don't have to go out and sign a wide receiver for $25 million. It's not one guy. I agree. It's not one guy for the Panthers. I do think one guy is that important to Bryce Young. I do think one guy is that important to your quarterback having a season that allows him to have a little fun next year. Michael Pittman Jr. would be really, really interesting. They might tag him up there. Calvin Ridley would be really, really interesting. T. Higgins would be really, really interesting. Heck, even Marquise Brown. He's got, like, I don't love the Marquise Brown thing, but what I will say is, I look at Bryce Young, and some people are going to hate this, and Tua Tagovailoa as similar guys. Both from Alabama, both used to, in their college years, used to playing with a level of talent that they weren't surrounded by early in their NFL careers. Both started slow in the NFL. And
both got a different head coach after year 1.
Both got a different head coach after. That's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that. But then also what happened is once that new coach came in, at least for Tua, they started building around his skill set, right? Because I've made this comparison a bunch. But the Dolphins, Tua's early career, they had Devontae Parker. They had Mike Gesicki. They had Preston Williams, I believe was his name. These guys are all 6'4" and above, pass catchers, wide receivers, or tight ends. And they're jump ball guys. But guess what? Who did Tua play with in college? Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy. These aren't jump ball guys. These are create separation guys, either speed or great route running. So he wasn't comfortable. It obviously wasn't comfortable. Fitzpatrick was playing better than him in Miami early on. And then what did they do? They go, all right, what does Tua need? Well, he needs separation guys. What did they do? They drafted Jalen Waddle. They traded for Tyreek Hill. Tua's played significantly better. So who did Bryce Young have his best success with in college? Jamison Williams, right? When he won the Heisman year, he had a bunch of good wide receivers headlined by Jamison Williams, who ended up being like the 12th pick or whatever with Detroit.
Yeah, first-round pick.
Speed, deep ball, right? You go watch that highlight film. It's all him running down the field for 60 yards and catching deep posts and deep goes and deep corners and deep everything. Marquise Brown brings some of that. If he can keep his hamstrings healthy and stay healthy, he can bring some of the skill set that Bryce Young works better with. And quite frankly, that Tua worked better with, because it's what they had in college. So a number one wide receiver doesn't have to look like Megatron, right? You don't have to be 6'4", 6'5", 235. I mean, if you can find one.
I mean, unless you're going to do it.
No, like if you can find one, don't let me stop you. But it's just somebody who can be at the top of the wide receiver hierarchy that fits better with what Bryce Young does.
I'm definitely with you on the receiver, like having that go-to guy, and then also the protection, because you can have the great guys on the outside, but if he doesn't have more than 2 seconds to throw the football, then what's good on the outside? But I think that's it's a 1A, 1B, type of deal. But I'm with you when it comes to, I think when it comes to the offensive line, figure out, okay, what are you doing with Ekwonu?
Yep.
If you're moving him inside, then get a guard, then get a center and get a tackle. If you're keeping him at tackle, then get a center and a guard.
And do it with conviction.
Yeah.
Right? Because like if you think like, oh, we'll give Ickey one more year at tackle, then we might move him to guard, then you're not going to spend, or you're not going to invest the amount you should on a guard, because you'd be like, oh, then if Christensen plays well and this guy plays well, we won't have a spot for Ickey. Like whatever you do, that's what you're doing with him, right? So make your decision and do it with conviction, and put guys around him that can help.
I'm wondering if a guy like Graham Barton from Duke, who can play center and guard, will slide down to 33, and he can play tackle. If he slides down to 33, like, okay, if you sign a center, he can play guard, or if you sign a guard, he can play center. If you move Ickey into guard, he can play center. So he gives you that versatility and quality.
You want a real coincidence on what you just said?
Sure.
During the commercial break, I was looking at Daniel Jeremiah, NFL.com, put out his top 50 big board. What number do you think Graham Barton was? Graham Barton, interior offensive line from Duke, who Dennis just explained why it might be a good fit for Carolina. 33.
Ha!
Guess what pick Carolina has? 33. Now, I know big board doesn't always line up with mock draft, but, I mean, that's a little bit of synergy that we did not plan prior to this segment. The Drive with Tim Donnelly, 99.9 The Fan. We'll end on that because that just felt good. That just, the planets aligned for us a second there.
Nailed it.